The evening began inside the grand dining hall of the Royal Meridian Hotel, where crystal chandeliers glimmered like suspended stars and every corner breathed luxury. Wealthy guests lounged at tables draped in white linen, their polished laughter echoing through the room, laughter that often came at the expense of those who served them. At the center of this glittering world sat Victor Harrington, a man whose arrogance seemed to fill the hall as much as the golden light above him. He thrived on attention, on being louder, wealthier, and more dramatic than everyone around him. Beside him sat a royal investor from Dubai.com and composed a stark contrast to Victor's showmanship. Then came Mayam, the young waitress carrying a simple basket of red and white roses. Victor pointed at her with a grin, turning the room's attention toward her as he issued a challenge meant more for entertainment than kindness. Mayam stood there with the roses pressed gently against her chest, but what no one in that grand hall could see was the storm of memories swirling behind her calm eyes. She hadn't always been a waitress in America. Just a few years earlier, she had been a daughter, a student, a girl with dreams in a small Syrian town. War had taken almost everything her home reduced to dust, her father lost in the chaos, and her childhood swallowed by fear. She came to the US hoping to rebuild a life, working long hours and sending whatever she could back to her family. Yet even after all she had endured, she carried herself with quiet strength. So when Victor mocked her accent and turned her into a spectacle, she felt a familiar pain rise. But this time, she refused to let it silence her. She chose courage instead of shame. Mayam took a slow breath, steadying the trembling in her hands as the entire hall waited for her to stumble, to entertain them with her fear. But instead of shrinking, she lifted her chin and allowed the strength she had carried across borders to rise within her. When she finally spoke, her voice flowed in flawless, melodic Arabic, soft, poetic, and impossibly graceful. The words drifted through the glittering hall like a quiet hymn, carrying a meaning far deeper than a simple sales pitch. She spoke of love, of hope, of how even something as small as a rose could touch the heart before it ever reached the mind. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Conversations faded mid-sentence. Even the chandeliers appeared to still, as though listening. The royal investor leaned forward in awe, fully understanding every word. And Victor's smirk slowly dissolved into silent disbelief. Victor didn't speak at first. He simply stared at Mayam, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. The arrogance he wore so confidently only minutes earlier seemed to drain from his face, replaced by something far more human: realization. Her words had reached a place he didn't know was still capable of feeling. Slowly, he reached into his coat and pulled out his checkbook, the room watching in utter silence as he scribbled down a number far beyond the amount he had thrown at her as a joke. When he handed the check to her, Mayam's eyes widened, stunned not by the money, but by the unexpected sincerity in his gaze. She whispered that she couldn't accept it, that it had never been about the prize. But Victor shook his head faintly, unable to form the right words. For the first time in a long time, he seemed humbled, truly humbled. In the months that followed, Mayam carried that check with the same care she once gave to the roses, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder that dignity, when protected, can reshape a life, instead of using the money for herself. She began building something she wished she'd had when she first arrived, a safe place for women who had lost their footing in unfamiliar worlds. Slowly, The idea took shape in a small rented space where she painted soft colors on the walls and placed a single rose in a vase as a promise of hope. She named it the Garden of Hope, a community center offering language classes, job guidance, and emotional support to refugee women starting over. What began with a few hesitant visitors grew into a thriving sanctuary, filled with laughter that held no mockery, only healing. And within those walls, she found her own healing too. Years later, when the center had already blossomed into a haven for countless women, a familiar figure appeared quietly at the doorway. Victor Harrington stood there, no longer the man whose laughter once echoed through a golden hall, but someone softened by time and reflection. He watched Mayam as she guided a group of women through a language lesson, her voice calm, her presence steady. When she finally noticed him, there was a brief pause, one filled not with tension, but with recognition. Victor stepped forward with eyes that carried remorse and gratitude all at once. He told her she had changed him, that her strength had forced him to confront parts of himself he had long ignored. But Mayam simply smiled, reminding him that change comes from within, sparked only when a person chooses to listen rather than judge. In that simple exchange, both found a quiet sense of closure, and kindness completed its circle.